We can all talk about these fundamentals and these basics like saving money, eating right, lowering stress, giving great service, you name it. It doesn't mean that we've mastered it. That because we talk about something that we're doing it well. There's so many things that I could teach you about, I could talk about, and yet I can go back in 10 minutes and fail completely miserably at.
Just because we're humans and we understand the English language and we have the capacity to speak with our friends at the bar, at a gathering of some sort, doesn't make us a good speaker, does it?
For me, when it comes to speaking, light travels faster than sound. So is your body language right? Is there a congruency of how you stand? How about just practice? Don't use the stage as practice time. Practice before game time. A lot. Our ability to talk about a subject matter can create the consoling illusion that we've mastered it.
You're listening to the Real Business Connections Network. Real Business Connections Network. Powered by Balbert Marketing, LLC. Subscribe now and check us out at realbusinessconnections.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome, everyone, once again to 15-Minute Friday, easy to implement business tips for busy people who want to learn more and do better in the shortest amount of time possible. I'm your host, Ben Albert of Real Business Connections, and we have a round 2 guest on the show today, Rene Rodriguez. Rene, what's up? How are you?
Great to be here, Ben. Thanks again for having me.
I've got the brief bio because Rene was episode 28 of Learn, Speak, Teach. That is literally the last thing that was in the stream. So if you want to listen to that long discussion, just go to the previous episode or check out the show notes. But Rene Rodriguez is a best-selling author and speaker, highly regarded for his transformative, neuroscience-based approach to leadership and influence. He's the creator of the Amplify formula, author of Amplify Your Influence, and I'm a member of your mastermind group, so I get to spend a lot of time with you, Rene, and I appreciate you coming back on today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I love how you have this structured, so I'm looking forward to it.
We gave the broad strokes. Is there anything that I missed today in that short bio, or maybe from the last conversation?
Well, you'd asked me something that wouldn't be in the bio. I absolutely love Latin music, and I was a conga player for 20 some years. So I Latin percussion was always a fun thing. So I like the rhythm of things. If you watch my videos, usually there's a rhythmic timing to them, and where we use the music and how we synchronize different points and things like that. So if you're an audiophile and you like music and rhythm, you usually like the videos that we create.
I am an audiophile, and I'm already going on a tangent, but I have to ask, how did you get your start in music? I'm so curious.
Music? Well, I wanted to play drums as a kid really bad, but my mother wouldn't let me. She said it was too loud. And so the moment I graduated and went to college, the first trip I took was to the Minneapolis Drum Center, and I said, "Teach me how to play." I was 18 years old.
Wow. And here we are today. Rene,
Yep.
I'll go on tangents, but the audience always wants a quote of the day. How should we start today?
When I was thinking about that, there's a couple different quotes that come to mind, but I'm thinking about probably the most relevant, and it's from Stanley Kubrick. This is not a quote that many people have heard before, but I think it sums up so much of what's needed right now. And he says that our ability to talk about a subject matter can create the consoling illusion that we've mastered it. And I think we're in a time right now that requires us to go back to basics. We're in a time right now that needs fundamentals. And just because we can all talk about these fundamentals and these basics, like saving money, eating right, lowering stress, giving great service, you name it, it doesn't mean that we've mastered it. And so there's a consoling illusion that because we talk about something that we're doing it well. There's so many things that I could teach you about, I could talk about, and yet I can go back in 10 minutes and fail completely miserably at. And so I think that there's a humility in that realization that just because I can talk about something does not mean that I've mastered it. And also be wary of those who are giving advice, because just because they're good at talking about it does not mean that they've mastered it. And so I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
Expand on this, because I know from a mastermind session that you hosted, and just by looking at you, you used to be a little bit chubby, and now you're getting ripped. This is a clear example of just that, right?
A little bit chubby? You mean ridiculously huge? I was big. I was 308 pounds. Well, and I'm also 6'3", but I was, fortunate opportunity to be able to wear suits, and I wear suits well, so you couldn't really see it all the time, but you could. You didn't know, you could see it in my face was a little bit bigger. But now, if you look at the before and after, it's massive. Yeah, I weighed in at 245 pounds today, and to me, there was an incongruency for me. It was something that was weighing heavily on me in terms of, literally, weighing heavily in the sense of, here I'm talking about disciplines in life and learning how to influencing, managing change. But clearly I could not, or was not managing a very important change, or was in denial of a change around my health. And it was one of those that, I have gained weight, I've lost weight. I've been an athlete, played college basketball for a little bit, so I understand working out. I understand diets and macros, and I can tell you exactly how many calories are involved in the process and what you should and shouldn't eat. That does not mean that I was doing it. And there was something about it that sort of clicked in me that said, you know what, I need to stop talking about it and do it. I need to stop thinking about it and thinking I know. And I changed my paradigm to saying, I don't know something until I can do it. And I don't have any mastery until I can actually do it. So just because I can talk about social media doesn't mean that I've mastered it. Well, I told myself that. I said, until I have a decent following, then I can maybe start talking about it a little bit. But I have to have that decent following for a consistent basis. And so it's the same with health and, finances to, influence and persuasion. One of the reasons why I do share that I spoke 237 days last year is so I can tell you that what I'm doing is proven and relevant. It's not something that I just made up and read in a book. I wrote the book and I'm out there talking about it. And so that gives me a lane that I can play in with some credibility. But also there's an identification piece of knowing what lanes I shouldn't play in. And like, I shouldn't talk about how to grow hair. I shouldn't talk about the menstrual cycle. And those are places that I don't have credibility. And there's a million other things I shouldn't talk about because I don't have credibility in those areas. So yeah, I think it's interesting when you look at it from that perspective.
It is. This kind of reminds me of, there's a King of the Hill episode where Bobby Hill gets an F in English, and Hank Hill says, "English, you speak English." And just because we're humans and we understand the English language and we have the capacity to speak with our friends at the bar or at a gathering of some sort, doesn't make us a good speaker, does it?
Yeah. Well, we all know how to speak, but I think it's not even speaking, it's influencing. Because, people say, well, I'm very comfortable on stage. I'm like, well, last I checked it, your effectiveness on stage has nothing to do, your comfort on stage has nothing to do with the effectiveness on stage. Because I know a lot of people that are very comfortable speaking on stage, boring us out of our minds. Or I know people that are comfortable on stage that are arrogant and offering no impact. And so comfort does not equal impact. Sometimes, a lot of times, discomfort will equal more impact. Being vulnerable, doing something that's out of your comfort zone, sharing a story that you haven't shared before, taking a risk, doing something edgy. All of those things are probably uncomfortable to do, but probably, and usually most often, carry a lot bigger impact.
So how do we, and I know this is a short episode, but give us like something actionable here. How do we go back to the basics and ensure that when we're speaking, we might be comfortable and confident, we want to create impact? What do we do to ensure we're actually creating that impact?
Well, basics for me when it comes to speaking begin, light travels faster than sound. So is your body language right? Is there a congruency of how you stand? Do you have your chest back? Your chest out, your shoulders back? Are you smiling? Is your chin raised just ever so slightly? Not too much, but just a little bit. Have you opened your eyebrows? Right? We call those the curtains. Are you open to people talking with you? There's all sorts of things. Do you have your hands in the right place? These are all basic pieces that are, the low-hanging fruit, from a physical perspective. Then have you put the work in? How about just practice? Don't use the stage as practice time. Practice before game time, a lot. And create some fictitious stages. Do the things that are normal. None of this is profound. None of it's new. Oh, practice, he said. Yeah, but practice more. Practice more intensely. Start thinking about how you look at the practice. And, there's a difference between a pro and how they practice versus an amateur. A pro is usually dripping in sweat after their practice. Maybe just after even one drill, doing something as simple as layups, because they're doing it at real-time speed, multiple things happening at the same time. And so they're training themselves at a different level of intensity. Most people don't do that. And so getting back to some of those basic fundamentals, and then having the courage to get rated. Yeah, I know how to speak. Great. What were your ratings last time? Well, no. I mean, people, I'm not really that kind of speaker. I say, okay, well, hold on. Why don't you just start with a rating where you're at? Scale of 1 to 10. And maybe in comparison to some of the other speakers. Then you have a place to say, okay, well, yeah, I know how to speak, but why am I not the one that's getting paid 50 grand? Why am I not the one that wrote the book? Why am I not the one that's writing the articles? So then, okay, cool. Now you have something to shoot for. I asked myself those questions my whole life. I was reading the books. Well, when can someone read my book? I was listening to the CDs and the audios and the cassettes. Well, when will they hear my voice? I wonder if I can even do that. And to be able to do that, the things that one has to overcome, the self-doubt, the inner voices, the disempowering behaviors and disempowering beliefs, to then be able to, is really the magic of it. It's not like everybody can, just most won't. Why? It's not for laziness. It's usually just fear and maybe a lack of belief. And when you can instill belief in someone that they actually can believe they do it, you watch them do whatever it takes because they believe it. It's pretty cool.
It is cool. And Amplify Your Influence, I read it. It's a great book. Did you feel that fear when you first clicked publish? I know you didn't just click publish, but when it went live, are you worried? Were you worried at that time, or were you confident?
Petrified, but at the same time excited, because I knew that I put everything that I had in that book. I knew that there wasn't anything else I could have done. That was the best I had at the time. And all I care about is that. Even if it bombed, I would have been happy with it. But yeah, of course it's scary. Will people buy it? Are we going to do good? Are we going to hit a bestseller list? Which one? And like what's going to happen? Is this, are they going to laugh at this? Will I get, did I capture all the research correctly? I mean, there's so many things.
How did it get rated?
Well, we made number 2 bestseller on Wall Street Journal. We were in the national bestseller list on USA Today. We were Publishers Weekly bestseller. We were also ranked a top 20 best business books of 2022. So we did a lot better than expected, which is cool.
It's the feedback you like to hear.
Yes. Yes. They actually are asking us to write another one. So we're in the process of exploring what that would be.
Is it a secret? Is it a secret, or do you want to talk about it?
Well, it's most likely going to be on what we call the narrative gap of leadership and communication. And there's a narrative gap that's happening in the lack of communication. Our brain functions under creating narratives, and those narratives are constructs of reality. And the media understands that, politicians understand that if they can control the narrative, they control how people describe what's going on. If they describe what's going on, they control that. They can describe the reality that's created based on that. And so narratives construct reality. So if I'm good at storytelling, then I can actually shift perception, shift reality, because I can own the message and the narrative. But then there's also a narrative gap when leaders and people don't communicate. And so if narratives are how we construct reality, and there's a gap in that, then the human brain can't handle a gap in reality. So it has to fill it somehow, and it fills it instantaneously. And the way it fills it is with an assumption. And so that assumption then fills this gap. But then why don't we fill it exactly the same? People fill that gap differently. Well, why? Well, they create that assumption based on their past experiences. And most people have different past experiences. And so then I go, okay, so if most of my life is a narrative gap, there's gaps in how we do it. People are then making massive amounts of assumption based on their past experiences to understand what I'm saying, who I am, and what I do. Well, how could I bypass that process? Well, what if I told my story and I shared vulnerability of who I was, where I came from, my origin, what I believe, and I communicated that via social media, via articles I've written, a book, a video, you name it, letters, conversations, speeches. Well, then now all of a sudden, when there's a narrative gap, they're not going to pull from their experience. They're going to pull from my story. And then I get the benefit of the doubt. And then they get a chance to have a more accurate way to fill that assumption, because it's based on my truth, not their assumption. That's the sort of the depth of the concept that we're going after.
I'm going to have you back, brother.
Be fun anytime.
Keep me in the loop with that. This is incredible, and I want everybody to grab their pens, pencils, stop the treadmill, stop the car if you can, because this is like the section we want to write things down. I joke all the time, this is an infotainment. We want to take something we learned and integrate it. So first, before we get into the assignment, how can I support you? I mean, I personally already am supporting you, Rene. I love the mastermind. Love
coaching
the
group.
podcast.
It's a coaching group. I think you're part of the group coaching group.
I call it a mastermind. It's a coaching group.
Oh, we have an actual mastermind that's different.
Oh,
That meets 3 times a year, and so that's just from a product perspective. Just make sure we separate those out. You're a marketing guy, you know that.
Yeah, no, I do. So I am in the coaching group.
Yeah.
I also have access to the training where I basically have Rene at my fingertips at any time of day, and have the book. Is there any other ways people can support you? Do you have a hub where we can find all these things?
Yeah, meetrene.com has everything there. And follow me on Instagram. It's probably the best one to follow. It's just Learn with Rene, RENE, 1 E at the end. And our Instagram account, we do a video a day, sometimes more than 1 video a day, all educational videos on different topics, less than a minute. They're put a lot of time and effort into that. It's been something really important to us and to our clients. But meetrene.com has all the links and everything. And right now, depending on when this airs, we're having a free masterclass that people can learn about the book and some of the specific pieces in there. It's pretty exciting.
And you're putting on those master classes. It feels like quarterly, right? So it doesn't really matter when someone listens to you. You're putting on events all the time.
Putting events all the time. Yeah. So the masterclass is free. We've got our AmpCon virtual events that are a little different, but I'm debating on actually switching those up and just making those more available. But yeah, we do those quarterly. Just get to our website, follow me on Instagram, and as long as you're watching my stories, you'll know everything that's happening and where I'm at.
Cool. Give us some homework, because again, if we don't integrate any of this stuff, this was just a wasted time, So how can we integrate some of this stuff that we've talked about today to actually be a more impactful speaker?
Well, I would do a self-inventory. And this is hard because it requires one big thing to do this right. And that is the removal of your ego. And I don't say that lightly because that is not easy. Our ego serves a purpose to protect us and to do all sorts of things and avoid embarrassment. But sometimes it's unconscious. Those of us who say I don't have ego, oof, that's the ones we got to watch out for. I know that my worst moments of my life was when I allow my ego to make a decision. And because it doesn't serve me in the long term, it doesn't serve those around me, which really are in touch with my values. I want to be of service to people. But the ego can get in the way. The ego also doesn't want to look at what are the areas in which that I talk a good game, but I'm not following it. But if you let go of that ego for a minute and just truly ask yourself, did I do good today? Am I doing well at this? Am I good at this? And if you can honestly answer that question positively, then you can start realizing, okay, where am I lacking? Now all of a sudden I can start saying, how do I get back to the fundamentals of this? Maybe it's as simple as health. And as complex and as difficult as health. Maybe it's something financially, and you got to take a good, honest look in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm spending more than I make. Maybe it's with relationships. I'm not being the kind of person that I promised that I would be at the beginning of this relationship. Maybe it's in the fact that I'm not attracting the right people. So then maybe I need to be a better person to start attracting people. How can you look at that from an ownership perspective? And the reason you look at it from an ownership perspective is that you want to be able to identify things that are under your control so that you can change them. The moment you lose sight of that, you start talking about things you can't control in other people while you're the victim of whatever it is, you're out of luck, because there's no way in the world that you're going to change someone else unless they want to be changed. But if you look at yourself and you say, I own my results, I own everything that happened to me. People betrayed me. That's my fault somehow. How? Well, I wasn't looking at the writing on the wall. I didn't set my boundaries. I took it hook, line, and sinker. Whatever. For some reason, I'm attracting bad people. Okay, what is it about me? Well, maybe I feel, X, Y, and Z. Whatever it is, keep asking with no ego, and then attack it with abandon.
Beautiful. And this is not just to be a better speaker. This is to be a better human being, it sounds like.
Well, I think the best speakers are the better human beings, because there's technique to speaking. You can learn that. Google it. Now, there's plenty. Read my book, watch my videos. But being the right person and then learning the skills, that's where the magic for me is. To me, to help somebody be the right person before I teach them the skills. You teach the skills to the wrong person. Now you get dictators, and you get, the Fidel Castros of the world. You get the people that are highly charismatic, but maybe not doing all the right stuff. So charisma can be taught. There's a science to it. But I want to get people to be the right person before we teach it to them.
Amen. Rene, thank you for coming back on the show. When the new book, it sounds like it's still in the work. I'm going to invite you back, man. You can come whenever you'd like.
I appreciate you, my friend. I appreciate that. Just, how to make it work.
Thanks again.
Appreciate you. Thank you.